on the outskirts of a small town where passers-by rarely visit. There is an old castle that has long been abandoned. One day, a strange family settled in this castle, a family of vampires. Their eerie shadows and whistling disappeared into the darkness of the night, and the locals began to disappear without a trace, leaving behind only bloody footprints. In the beginning, everything seemed relatively calm. Vampires did not attack people and even help them in the most difficult situations. But over time, strange incidents began to occur related to their appearance. Not far from the castle, the bodies of dead deer were found, which were brutally mutilated. The inhabitants of the town began to fear the night and avoid passing by the castle. All signs pointed to vampires, and the local people decided to hunt them down and destroy them. They gathered on the night of the full moon, when the vampires were the weakest, and went to the castle. But what was waiting for them at the old gate? And what terrible secret is hidden behind this family of vampires? Under the cover of the dark night, a group of brave locals approached the castle. In their hands were sharp daggers, glowing torches, and mixtures of garlic and silver, known means of fighting vampires. Despite the fear that made their hearts beat faster, they were still resolute in their decision and ready to pursue their goal. The castle gates were locked with huge bolts, guarded by gloomy statues depicting terrible monsters. Despite the terrible feeling that they were all being watched, the brave people boldly opened the gate and went inside. Darkness engulfed them, and only the torchlight gave them a little courage. Creaking sounds arose, which could be heard from the depths of the castle. They did not know what was waiting for them, and fear began to take hold of each of them. But they didn't give up. Passing through lone corridors and labyrinths, they finally came to the mortuary in the castle, where they found a family of vampires led by a bloodthirsty countess who was beautiful and beautiful. As their ultimate goal, they suddenly discovered that the vampires they thought were evil and disgusting were not at all what they imagined them to be. The Countess of Vampires, named Elizabeth, revealed to them the secret of her castle. It turned out that they were cursed not to have the right to leave their walls. Since a long time ago, when they were still human, they allowed an evil sorcerer named Mordecai to enter their castle and swore that he would be able to find shelter within their walls. In gratitude, he turned them into vampires and cursed them so that they could never leave the castle. Mordecai was going to use them as his own servants and continue his evil deeds with their blood. Countess Elizabeth admitted that they wanted to get rid of this curse, and were looking for a way to break it, but they had no success. She begged the locals not to destroy them, but to help them find a way to break the curse. The secrets of the castle are just beginning to be revealed, and every choice can have unpredictable consequences. The story of innocently cursed vampires and their encounter with the brave inhabitants of the town is just beginning to unfold in its dark splendor. Countess Elizabeth, with sadness in her eyes, told the brave residents of the town about her struggle for freedom from the curse, their regrets, and their desire to find true correction for their past sins. She begged them to help break the curse that had been hanging over them for a long time. The locals were at a loss. They were torn between a desire to help vampires and a fear of the unknown. In the end, they decided to give the vampires a chance. They agreed with the Countess that she should provide them with information and help in finding a way to break the curse. In return, the locals gathered to hunt down Mordecai and his evil influence. Joining forces, vampires and humans went in search of Mordecai and the means to break his curse. They entered mysterious places and faced numerous trials and dangers. At every step, they had to overcome traps, solve riddles, and defeat curses that surrounded caves, black altars, and labyrinths that hid Mordecai's secrets. During their journey, they discover a terrible truth. A secret that concerns not only vampires and Mordecai, but also the entire city and its past. However, their adventure is just beginning, and there is still much to discover in order to solve the mystery underlying all this dishonest castle and its curse. Now they understood that justice and freedom could only be achieved together, and they would have to join forces to uncover the mystery of the past and defeat evil in this dark corner of the world. When they reached the middle of the maze, they had to pass through a hall with a mirrored floor. At first glance, the hall seemed empty, but as they began to move through it, the mirrors began to reflect the past, present, and even possible future events. Suddenly, the image of Mordecai, the ill-fated sorcerer, appeared in front of them, wandering around the hall, muttering strange spells. When he reached the center of the hall, he suddenly stopped, and his gaze fixed on one of the mirrors. At that very moment, they saw Mordecai as he mightily cast a spell to imprison the vampires in the castle. It turned out that his goal was to use vampire blood for his dark distortion spells, to become immortal and gain power over the city and its inhabitants. The dark truth about Mordecai was so terrifying that it made each of them shudder. They realized that now their struggle was not only for the liberation of vampires and the city, but also for all living beings who were potential victims of the sinister sorcerer. With the help of information obtained from the Hall of Mirrors, they risked their lives to go through the next ordeal, which led them to the ancient hidden altar. The brave travelers had to solve the mystery of the altar and find a powerful spell that could break the curse of Mordecai and free the vampires. But when casting the spell, something went wrong. Instead of being able to free the vampires, the altar disappeared, and instead the figure of Mordecai appeared in front of them, who had already learned that they were trying to disrupt his plans. He began to summon the dark forces to destroy them once and for all. Their adventure is just beginning, and they are forced to overcome the last, most dangerous test, which faces not only their own fate, but also the fate of all those involved in this dark story. When Mordecai began to summon the dark forces, the hall was filled with ominous shadows and frightening ghosts that surrounded the brave travelers. Vampires and locals fought with desperate desperation, but met resistance that threatened all life in the castle. At this time, a vampire named Alexander swung a mighty sword and was able to break the darkness, creating a moment of weakness that allowed them all to retreat to safe places. But their time was running out, and they realized that they urgently needed to think about new plans. Countess Elizabeth wisely advised everyone to put aside fear and doubt and act as a single team, based on a single goal: to stop Mordecai and destroy his evil plans. Despite all the dangers and obstacles, they had to develop a new strategy and prepare for the last battle in the castle. Together they contacted an ancient sage who was hiding in the castle and who helped with sacred knowledge and predictions. He explained to them that only at a unique moment, when the moon was at its peak, would Mordecai's powers be weakened, and they would have the only chance to break his curse. But their adventure is just beginning, and many dangers, mysteries, and decisions await, each of which will have a decisive impact on the outcome of this epic saga. On the day when the moon came to its maximum brightness, the brave travelers marched against Mordecai. The battle was fierce and terrible. The dark forces of Mordecai were powerful, but thanks to the forces of unity and courage, they were able to weaken his artificial curse. At the last minute, when Mordecai was weakened, Alexander, a vampire who had tried the power of his own love and compassion, turned to Mordecai with forgiveness and offered to help him heal. This moment of compassion proved to be the key to breaking his darkness, and the curse was broken. And at that moment, when everything seemed to be buried in darkness, they saw a miracle happening. Instead of the evil Mordecai, an ordinary man stood in front of them. also cursed and radically changed. He witnessed the simplicity and kindness of these people and vampires and decided to help them. Mordecai began to heal, and thanks to his help, their combined efforts brought peace and freedom to the castle. Countess Elizabeth and Mordecai reconciled, and thanks to their power, the castle became a symbol of peace and reconciliation, where vampires and humans could live in harmony. And so the story ended, leaving open questions about how they adapted to a new life together, and about their fate. But under this tortuous finale there was a wise moral that sometimes miracles happen where you least expect them, and that the power of unity and love eventually overcomes all darkness and obstacles.